На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the RFN Podcast. This week we've got a little bit of a packed episode as we review all the latest in the last round of the Champions League group stages, recap the events of last weekend's RPL action, and go over a big news at the top of the table as Spartak Moscow sack and part ways with the sporting director Shamil Gazizov. Joining me this week is, as usual, David Sanson.
Good evening, James.
And Richard Pike.
Good evening, James. How are we?
I'm good, mate. I'm really good today. I wasn't good on Tuesday after watching the Zenit game, and to start off straight away, Zenit went down 2-1 losers at home to Borussia Dortmund on Tuesday afternoon in UK time, where we all are. So, Richard, you watched Zenit live. What did you think of the game?
Yeah, I mean, let's be fair. I think the game just kind of summed up Zenit's Champions League campaign. I think it went wrong right from the moment, from the get-go. They were too cautious in the first half against the Bruges side, missing a few first-team players due to, COVID cases and to injury and suspension too. Yeah, and the game against Dortmund. I mean, there was still some first-team players out there for Dortmund. I mean, Hummels played, Meunier, Hummels, but I mean, there were no Erling Haaland, and it was an opportunity for Zenit. And again, they got the lead in the game. And you thought at that time, okay, they were doing well. They played relatively well in the first half, from what I saw, from what I was seeing, they were playing well in the first half, and then second half, again, just I think possibly just didn't quite have the killer instinct to go for a second goal when they were on top, or when they were, when the game was balanced and they were a goal up, and then the old frustrating thing of individual mistakes once again. For the first goal, a rebound, Mikhail Kirchkov doesn't hold the ball, and then it's tap in for Dortmund, and the second goal was just shocking, really. I mean, it was just really, really poor. Axel Witsel, there must have been about 6 Zenit players nearby him. Now, I know he's a Zenit legend, and you want to give him a nice welcome back to St. Petersburg, but don't be so charitable. He got so much space and time to pick his shot, and I think that just sums up Zenit's entire Champions League campaign. It's just been frustrating from the get-go, never got going, and just an embarrassment. 1 point from 12, 1 point of a possible 18, and no wins from all 3 of their home games. All 3 of their home games is just a huge disappointment. Huge disappointment.
Now, before the game, Sergei Semak did make quite a perhaps controversial but seemingly bold decision in dropping his captain, Artyom Dzyuba, in which he started with Sardar Azmoun, Sebastian Deleuze and Malcolm in the Champions League game for the first time this season. Now, Richard, do you think that made much of a difference, especially with Deleuze in his what's favoured more central role, in which he decried midweek on Twitch famously that he wanted to be playing more in the centre and less out wide? Do you think this did make a difference to Zenit? They had more possession and more shots on goal than any other game in the Champions League so far.
Oh yeah, I thought Deleuze did quite well in the first half. It's just very, very difficult, isn't it, to see him playing centrally, because obviously the partnership between Artyom Dzyuba and Sardar Azmoun has worked really well. But it'd be very interesting to see what happens now with Deleuze, won't it? Because he's out of contract at the end of the season, and obviously if he's expressed this desire to play centrally, and Zenit can't really offer it him because they've got 2 really good strikers in Artyom Dzyuba and Sardar Azmoun, who forged a superb partnership, then it's difficult to really see where they can fit him in, in a central role. Don't get me wrong, I think Deleuze did very, very well when he played, especially in the first half. He played very, very well, but with him taking up a foreign spot and with him being out of contract in the summer, it's difficult. If he wants to play central, I wouldn't blame him in the slightest for moving on in the summer. And I think he's been a good servant to Zenit. A good, solid, steady player, works hard on the wing, but not as when he signed, everybody was in super fanfare about him. but perhaps not quite hit as high a height as what we were expecting. I remember his first couple of games as Zenit, and he was really, really good. But yeah, he's been a good, solid player. But I think if there really is no room for him because of Juba and Azmoun centrally, and he's expressed a preference to play centrally, and he's out of contract in the summer, then afraid he might well be off in the summer. But yeah. I've only had a good game first half. Yeah, when he played centrally.
David, what's your thoughts on Driussi at Zenit? Do you think that he has a future in a central striking role like he wants?
Well, that was the thing. When he signed, I remember reading about him and how he was basically being described as being a penalty area striker at River Plate. I seem to recall reading that every goal he'd scored for the club that he'd left was scored from inside the box, and to see him then pushed out wide for Zenit was an interesting decision. He'd come with a very good goal scoring record actually from Argentina, and you're hoping to get that fox in the box sort of striker who can be in there and just grab you all sorts of different goals. I mean, Azmoun, they've got someone a bit similar. Granted, he's very good in the air, but Azmoun has never scored from outside the box either. He's a penalty box striker. So in a way, they sort of got he's the more direct competitor, and the fact that Azmoun has the aerial prowess that maybe Driussi doesn't quite, I think has probably cost Driussi. I will say that Driussi's contract is not out this summer. It's next summer. I know all the websites say it's this year, but I did see I think on the RFN DMs we got contacted by someone in the know to tell us that actually it's 2022. So that does change matters a little bit. Can we see him leaving? I think of the foreigners left at the club, with the limit, obviously we don't want to keep harping on about the limit, but of the foreigners at the club, he is arguably one of the more expendable ones. You'd want to be keeping guys like Douglas and Barrios for certain. Wendell is new. He's not going to go anytime soon. He needs more time to adapt and to show what sort of player he can be. Is he a guy who's going to clearly be better than someone like Ozdoev, or is he going to be there long term to be a lot better? Malcolm obviously is going to stick around because they don't want to look like they wasted 40 million euros. So yeah, if Zenit are going to have to reshuffle the squad, which you'd imagine they probably would like to reshuffle the squad if the limit didn't change, because they're a big, ambitious club. They're going to be probably wanting to make at least one marquee signing next summer. If they're having to get rid of a foreigner, Driussi might well be the one that has to be sacrificed. Considering his, he is good. You can see he's got a good relationship on the pitch with players like Zuba as well. But when he joined, he came in with a plethora of other Argentines, and they've all left. He's the last remaining one. Granted, he's got Barrios and presumably the Brazilians who he can speak Spanish with still. But from his comments, you could see that probably he was suffering a little bit of being played out of position and maybe not quite enjoying his time in St. Petersburg now that he's sort of one of the lone Argentines there. So I think long term his future probably isn't there. The idea from Zenit to buy him and turn around for profit is probably not going to happen either. You'd probably say they could probably make like maybe 10 million on him if they tried, but with the contract having 18 months left, that's not ideal. So yeah, I think he won't be around probably for too much longer at St. Petersburg.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember at the time when Spartak signed up a kind of load of Brazilians in the late first decade of the 21st century, in 2007 to 9. I think it was Karpin at the time when he was sporting director before he took charge of the team. He actually mentioned in a couple of interviews, that they liked to sign players 2 at a time from either the same country or of the same nationality or very similar linguistically or very similar culturally, just to help those players settle into life in Russia, because it is quite the cultural shock and cultural change, especially for someone from Argentina, from River Plate, where Gazizov was signed from. When that sort of was going around the Russian football echo chamber that Chelyus's contract was expiring in 2021, it very much, you'd presume that the power was in his hands, with Zenit being right on the limit with 8 foreigners, with him not really performing to the levels that one would have hoped when he was signed, and then this coming out, and him obviously seemingly being quite unhappy. But because it's 2022, then Zenit don't need to panic. They can find the right deal, they can find the right price, they've got plenty of time to shop him out. And I think with the comments midweek and basically looking at the results in Champions League, it's probably an inevitability of when Driussi will leave, not if Driussi will leave in the coming time. And I don't want to get at the guy because he's been good for Zenit, but it's galling that when you look at the stats of, he says he wants to play down as a central role, but to be fair to Semak and Mancini before him, who both played him out wide, both constantly preferred him out wide, his output from goals and assists, chance creation is just significantly better from the wide positions than it is centrally. Is that just because of his pace against RPL defenses? Maybe it's because it allows Zuber and Azmoun in the middle, who is just such a dynamic partnership. But either way, I just don't see Driussi's future being at Zenit anymore with all of this coming along. One last word on Zenit, really, Richard, is that just want to ask how young Danila Prokin did. Of course, he made his Champions League full debut last week against Club Bruges, made a pretty poor error leading to a goal, was dribbled past more than any other player, made less tackles than any other Zenit player, and he really struggled last week. So, Richard, how do you think he got on against that star-studded Dortmund side?
I thought he was all right. I mean, for that second goal that Witsel scored, I think that's just an entire defensive team error, isn't it? They literally, there was 6, 7 players. I mean, Prokin was one of them, but there was 6 or 7 players, all just standing and adoring Axel Witsel. None of them fought to close him down, and he just rifled a shot into the bottom corner. It really was just absolutely terrible defending from all the team, and it was a team game. But like I say, with Prokin, I thought he did okay. It's not always easy to, it's not always easy for a young player like that coming into a difficult situation, and like I say, he's coming up against a star-studded attack. But yeah, I just hope some ways and it can facilitate possibly a loan from in January. I know it's difficult with a foreign limit like we went on about last week because ideally now Zenit, you really need him to be playing every week somewhere else. And obviously if you can't get it at Zenit, which Lovren and Rakitsky are there, and he's not going to displace either of those two when they're fit. Really needs to be playing out on loan somewhere else. I'm just wondering if there's a way to do it. Could they, go with 3 centre halves with Chiszak, 2 central defenders with Chiszak, and then maybe if they're down 2 defenders, put someone like Douglas Santos at central defence. They've done that before, and just try and sort out a 6-month loan for Prokin somewhere, just somewhere where he can play a bit more, because I want to see him play every week. At 19, there's central defenders in other European countries who are playing, from other nationalities who are playing every week. You want to see him, playing to help his development and to aid him as a player, but it's obviously just very, very difficult. But I thought he did all right on the whole, considering the opposition that Zenit were playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as a quick correction on my behalf as well, I mentioned that it was the first time Chelyussi, Azmoun and Malcolm played together. Of course, they did play together against Bruges as well, so it's just a quick little mistake on my end there. But if we move onto the next game, which was Krasnodar, who travelled to London to play Chelsea. David, what were your thoughts on Krasnodar's 1-1 draw in the English capital?
Well, I mean, considering the opposition, a lot of people were saying that it was arguably, the biggest game in their history. Going away to Stamford Bridge. It was a shame the game didn't stand for more. Both teams were already assured of their position in their respective table, and I think therefore the game just lacked a little bit of something. It just wasn't. It wasn't as It wasn't. You could see both teams were not really going for it fully. Chelsea put out a weakened side, which you would expect in their position. They've got a big squad. They've got young players they want to use. Krasnodar gave it a good go. Obviously, they went out there. They took the lead. Nice bit of play to set up the goal. They'd had a couple of good link-ups down that left side with Klaassen, Vanderson, Cabella. Clausen had missed a shot probably 5 minutes prior to the goal from a similar move. So yeah, really, really good goal. Obviously, then not 5 minutes later, conceded a penalty. Kayo again at fault for that one with a poor tackle, really. On I think it was Tammy Abraham was the striker who spun him in the box. No Safanov this time to try and save the penalty. Gorodov was in there, who had a good game, I thought, actually. Made a couple of really good saves and stops in the second half, where Chelsea basically dominated, but didn't create anything too clear cut. You know, the biggest chance they had was Abraham, of which Gorodov kept out with his feet. They struggled second half. Well, you know, made a couple of changes early doors. Shappy came on, made his 100th appearance for the club. But really, the main chances for them came in the first half, and it was a shame to see them concede so quickly after scoring. If they could have maybe just settled on their lead for a bit, maybe taken 10-15 minutes, they might have been able to forge some counter attacks and things like that. But unfortunately, the goals came very quickly after they conceded. Just basically put the game back exactly where it had come from. And I think both teams were happy to settle for the draw. You know, in Krasnodar's case, it's they can go away and it's in their history now. They've got a draw at Stamford Bridge. That's a big thing for a club like Krasnodar. So, yeah, good performance on the whole from them. You know, nothing spectacular. Considering all the other ones where there've been some bad luck go against them, it was sort of the first eventless game. Really, the goals went in. Nothing good, nothing bad happened from the refs. Just a standard 1-1 draw, really.
Yeah, it was very much one of those games, which is the kind of dead rubber at the end of a group stages, where both teams seem to be relatively happy with what they've achieved. But to be fair to Krasnodar, I think the players actually felt like they maybe had a point to prove after being so demoralised and demolished last time out against Chelsea, with obviously the 4-0 win in the end. But Krasnodar obviously suffered quite a lot through this group stages in terms of injuries, not being able to get the best players out. They've learned as they've went on, this being a lot of the players and particularly the club itself and Murad Masayev's first Champions League campaign. So David, one question I would pose to you is, it's a what if question, unfortunately, is do you think that Krasnodar could have performed to a higher level? And maybe, I mean, they already are the best performing club and the pride of Russian football teams in Europe right now, but do you think that they could have performed even better had their big name players been fit for longer?
You'd really like to say so, wouldn't you? Like the game against Sevilla, I think it must have been the away game where they had the 2-0 lead and then went back down 3-2 despite having 10 men, despite Sevilla having 10 men. Vanderson was on the bench that game, and for the last 10 minutes, I think him and Klaassen both came on after injury. Like, they'd started the game with Sabur up front, and he only made it. I think he was even subbed off before half time once Krasnodar took the 2-0 lead because they wanted to try and shut up shop. But that game, as soon as Vanderson and Klaassen came on, they were playing so much better at going forward, and they only had 10 minutes to try and do anything about it. I definitely remember saying, I think it was probably towards the end of the previous season, maybe very early stages of this season, Vanderson was playing in the form of one of the best players in the league. He was one of those guys where you want him, and I remember we were comparing him to Promes and stuff. He was that guy who he was going to be the match winner for Krasnodar almost every week, and you could see it. Like, he was playing with such confidence. And so when he limped off against Pauk, we all thought, he'll be back. And then it ended up being, almost six weeks, maybe 2 months that he was out for. And that was just such a huge loss. And not to mention the rest, with half the squad being out with COVID, they had to start Spurtian, Sabua, Shappy, Utkin. A lot of these guys, they're very young. They're not experienced at this level. Sabua and Spurtian, of course, barely experienced in the first team. They're just having good seasons for Krasnodar. So, you would have loved to have seen them be competitive, but that's the thing. They were competitive even with the squads they put out. They really gave it a good go in both games against Sevilla. With a stronger team, maybe you fancy they could have come out of that. They obviously lost the return leg right at the death, having lost 3-2 away. I think the 1-1 draw at Rennes at the start was a really important result. It was the debut game. The squad was weak, but it wasn't at its weakest. It actually got weaker, I think, for the following 2 games. It then started to improve. Granted, they did start with obviously a left back, a left winger, and things like that. But Berg was also playing, so that was something that they didn't have in a couple of the other fixtures. So to come away from France with a draw in a game that they possibly could have won, but a good away draw, that was a big result, and obviously ultimately it was the defining result of the groups. So they started off strongly, and they did really well to deal with what was being chucked at them internally to force them out of the group. Considering how Zenit and Loko with their almost full squads did the opposite.
Yeah, it's weird to say this, but I think I'm perhaps speaking for a lot of us Russian football observers and saying that watching Krasnodar deliver on this stage is kind of like watching like a proud father from afar, where you've kind of banged their drum for so much because they do so much in the right way off the pitch and on the pitch. And to see them really come up against this adversity and still be the only club to be in Russian club to be in European competition at the other side of Christmas really just shows how big of a job and how good of a job that everybody at Krasnodar is doing, and they deserve the highest of praise. If we move on to Lokomotiv, and I will cover Lokomotiv myself, just quickly gloss over it because we spent quite a lot last week discussing Loko's game against Red Bull Salzburg, and then of course the events with the Kiknadze and all the rumours of his resignation and sacking and so on. But basically, Lokomotiv lost 2-0 against Bayern Munich last night, and they could only name such an inexperienced side with lots of first-team players missing, 5 substitutes, of which 2 were goalkeepers and 3 were young kids. Considering that, yes, they played Bayern's second team, I thought they really did put up quite a plucky performance. Plucky is probably the best word I can take to describe it without causing offence to Loko and their fans, in that they were never going to win, and at times they did try and go toe to toe and really had a few pretty decent efforts. One from the young lad who came on, Yosifov, I believe his name is. I can't remember it now, but
Yosifov.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he I thought his chance was huge, that 1-on-1 he had, but it's Bayern Munich. Even their second team is streets above Loko's first team, so there's no shame in the performances. Those defensive results that they got against Atleti in particular in the first game against Red Bull Salzburg really were excellent. And look, Loko had absolutely nothing to lose, and they overperformed, which is better than you can say about either Zenit or Siska. Now, what unfortunately we now must move on to is the more depressing news of the potential fallout of these generally poor and horrendous overall results from Russian teams, in that Russia is currently 8 points behind Portugal in the coefficients table, and is only 2 points ahead of Netherlands and Belgium, 4 ahead of Austria, and 5 ahead of Ukraine and Scotland. Now, in 2022, if you look at the projections of the coefficients by league in 2022, Russia does still stay 7th, but all of those countries really do catch up quite substantially. And this year, the 10 highest scoring countries in UEFA coefficients for 2021, so this season, none of them are Russia. England is highest with 13 points. Austria is in 10th with 5. Russia's only scored 4.1 over the course of this year, which is really quite poor, and it's a decline that needs to be addressed as soon as physically possible. But yeah, if we move back to domestic affairs, there was another round of RPL action at the weekend, in which there's now still a continued 3-way race at the top. As things stand, Zenit have got 35 points with a goal difference of 34. Spartak also level on 35 points, but with a goal difference of 15. And then just behind them, Siska, after their draw at the weekend, have only got 33 points with a goal difference of 16. So, Richard, how are your thoughts on how this title race is going to pan out? And right now, who do you think's best placed?
It's a difficult one to really say, isn't it? Because all three of them, Zenit, Spartak, and CSKA, have had some wobbly moments recently. I think Spartak obviously lost at home to Rostov, then drew. I think it was away at Ural. Zenit have had some hangovers as well themselves. Like they had their habitual drop points game in Tula. I think that's 4 times in a row now. Drop points away at Arsenal Tula. 2 of them have been defeats as well. 2 of them draws, if I remember correctly. And I think the team probably most disappointed of all has been CSKA because they've had a lot of home games recently. And other games on paper, which you'd say, whilst not easy, are winnable. And they've not really taken advantage of Zenit having this difficult run. They drew at home against Himki at the weekend. They drew at home against Sochi. They lost against Rubin. I think that was a chance in 3 or 4 of those games out of those 3 or 4 games I've just mentioned, there a chance in 2 or 3 of them to string some wins on the bounce and get build a bit of a lead over Spartak and Zenit, but they haven't really done it. It's really tough to say who's in the position of ascendancy at the moment in that 3. Yeah, I honestly can't call it because all the teams have been all 3 of them have had their little inconsistent moments and wobbles. And Spartak and Zenit both hit 5 at the weekend too. So, tough to say. But I think we might have a bit more of an idea after when the winter break hits these next couple of games. Because obviously, in 2 match days' time, the last game before the winter break, it's Spartak Zenit, and I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, it's really tough to say who's really been, who's in the ascendancy at the moment. It's so tight between the 3 of them.
Yeah, certainly. And if you look going forwards as well, how each team have to play. Now, of course, Spartak and Zenit play each other in the last game before the winter break. But looking after the winter break, all 3 sides have quite relatively similar fixtures. They all play each other just about. I mean, CSKA plays both teams. They all play Krasnodar. They all have to play Loko. They all have to play Dinamo. They all have to play Rostov. Their results are actually quite similar for the second half of the season. From a Spartak perspective, it's very much a 50-50 between. I would have preferred to have seen Spartak further ahead, considering they haven't had to play any European football, and now they are on equal footing in terms of games to be played. But on the other hand, it's the biggest crazy house in Russia for a reason, and we will be getting more on that later on in our last topic. But you don't expect anything optimistic with Spartak any season, so it's very much a glad how the season's going, but looking ahead, it's in CSKA or Zenit in particular's hands, with who they play and the games that they have. I mean, Zenit will get their players back on the pitch, will not have to play Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, and so on, again and again, like they have been. And same of course with CSKA, who are currently playing right now. We're now missing Vlasic, Jagoyev, Mario Fernandez, with one eye on the Ural game at the weekend. So it's going to equal out in that sense, and hopefully, from my perspective anyway, Spartak can really keep up that form with the Larson, Ponce, Alex Kral, and this sort of collection of foreigners in the spine of the team who are really, and Samuel Gijo and Ayaton, who are really bonding well off the pitch and really developing a strong understanding on the pitch. David, how's your old club Rubin getting on of late?
Well, we had a disappointing result over the weekend. Just gone, where we lost to Lokomotiv. We were without Despot. He'd come on in the previous game against Loko off the bench, played for half an hour, scored the winner, and then went off injured again. I think I have seen him back in training again, but he wasn't fit for last week, so that was a big loss. We took the early lead as well, which was even worse for the fact that we ended up losing 3-1. it wasn't good, and it underlined the fact that even Ignatiev is just not suited to how Rubin want to play. He's clearly lacking confidence as well. He missed a couple of half chances. His touch was poor, and then to make it all worse, he got himself sent off early in the second half for a second yellow for a needless. He just went to try and block a clearance, having already been on a yellow card, and it probably wasn't a second yellow, but it was needless regard. It was a needless thing anyway. So why risk it? Why risk the ref potentially giving you a card, even though it probably shouldn't have been? So that made the game a ton harder. I think at that stage it was 1-1 for the opening Loko goal. We had the goalkeeper Medvedev, who was playing in place of Dupin, who's still recovering from injury. Dropped the ball from a free kick and let a tap in for Ignatiev. And then in the second half, I seem to recall he was the one who fouled to give away a penalty. I actually can't picture the incident in my head, but I know he did something else bad in the second half. So it just basically underlined the fact that we desperately need Despot and Dupin back in the 11, and we probably need a better foil for Despot. He's so good at holding up the ball, and he's so integral for our team and so clinical. And with Ignatiev as second choice, and then after that, two youngsters in Klimov and Kosorov. It's not ideal. So either they've got to go out there and find another Russian who can do what Despot can do, which off the top of my head, I can't think of someone like that. Could probably have a good go, and arguably they'd probably have to go down a division to get anyone close to doing that. Or they have to shift out a foreigner and try and bring someone else in. I wouldn't mind seeing players like Begic go to get another striker in. But we'll see. It wasn't good, but we're still having a decent season despite the fact we're in 10th. It's so close between fifth and 10th. There we've got 5 points. A win would jump us straight up to 7th place. With other results going our way, if everyone was to lose above us. So we're still in there. We're still in the fight for 5th. I think there's a big fight there for 5th place. Any of those teams between 4th and 10th could easily get 5th still. We're tied with Krasnodar on points. So I'm not too displeased with the season so far. We've had some good results and some bad results. It's just getting a bit of consistency, which I'd like to see for us.
Yeah, very streaky Rubin. I've noticed that they go on long runs of very good results or decent results without losing, and then lots of long runs of not winning a lot. I mean, they've only won 3-8 and 3-7 in all competitions. I weirdly enough, it's a rare occasion today, and we both entirely agree with each other on a refereeing decision that wasn't for me a second yellow card from Ignatiev. It was just stupidity that he put himself in that situation, and it just smacked of, to be honest, desperation. Somebody who's really feeling the pressure of not performing and
publicly apologise later on Instagram to the fans for his sending off and his poor performance. So credit to him for that.
So who would be up front for Rubin next game if Despot's still out?
Well, I'm hoping Despot's back. I'm pretty sure I've seen him in training, but I would hasten to guess that it would be Makarov goes up front with Bakayev and Kvicha, who is back playing out wide. We certainly played a game in the last few weeks. I think it might have been the Khimki game or the Rostov game. Actually, I think it was the Rostov game. Both of those games we lost very poorly. And I'm pretty sure in one of those games, Makarov played as the striker, as it were. I can't see Slutsky giving Klimov a Kosorov a go. I think of the two, Klimov would be the more likely, just because he's a bit bigger and more likely to be able to hold up like Despot did. But we'll see.
So if we move back to Moscow, and actually one little interesting fact is if the current top four in the Finna L hold, then just under 50%, for 33%, so an entire third of the whole RPL will either be based in Moscow or the Moscow Oblast in some form. So on that, we move back to Dinamo. Now, Richard, Dinamo have been under what, in my eyes, is stellar form under Sandro Schwarz. They've only lost one game, which was that surprising 4-1 loss away to Rostov. And in his 6 games in charge, they have won 4, drawn 1, lost that one against Rostov. The one they drew was against Dinamo, and they've scored 13 goals in that time, including one in every single game that Schwarz has been in charge. It's a clear, massive improvement on what came before with the constant defensive nature. And at one point in 2020, Dinamo actually had more yellow and red cards than they did have goals in the back of the net. So, Richard, how did Dinamo do at the weekend?
Oh, the draw was against Spartak, by the way. Just a quick correction there. Yeah. No. I thought the first half was a little bit scratchy. It was a bit even Stevens, but then second half, I think Dinamo dominated, and they got the goal just before half time. It was Fomin, I think, who pounced after a goalkeeping save. After good work from, it was good combination play from Daniel Lezovoy, and I think, who was it? Vyacheslav Kuryov and Lezovoy, I think it was, if my mind serves me correctly. But I think the issue with Dinamo is that whilst they're playing very well at the minute on Sandro Schwarz, and there's a huge improvement, you've got to give him credit, apart with the only exception obviously being that disaster away at Rostov. The only issue again with Dinamo is failure to put a game away, and I think it just kind of highlights what they really need in the January window. They need a striker. I think it's ideally another player alongside Lezovoy in the 2 attacking midfielders behind the striker, but definitely a striker in the January window. And I have a funny feeling they might try and get it. I know with Maximilian Philippe on loan at Wolfsburg, there's a purchase option for 12 million euros. I think Philippe's been getting a few assists and playing a bit for Wolfsburg, so hopefully that can be exercised and some of the funds for that can go on a striker, because it's sad to say it, but Nikolai Komachenko just hasn't done it. He hasn't done it up front for Dinamo. He's suffering from, lack of confidence at the moment, just generally not doing it in games. And I mean, even now, like Schwarz is even bringing the young kid Chukavin off, the 18-year-old kid Chukavin off the bench in place of him. So that's not exactly a ringing endorsement for a striker there. Decent money wise striker signing there. They're bringing a young kid off the bench in front of you. So I think Dinamo, I think they have one foreign spot free. I'd prefer them to actually, if they can, try and move Sylvester Igbune on in the January window, because it's just not really worked out. I didn't think he suited them. He was more suited to Ufa, I think. Move him on in the January window. Maybe he could even go back to Ufa. Probably might be best for all parties involved. And then, then the 2 foreign spots free, then really go out in the January window where they get some of the proceeds from Philippe, really get themselves a good quality striker in there. Someone who's mobile, pacey, someone who can get in the gaps between the central defender and fullback, someone who, people like Lezovoy, Szymanski, Morrow can feed. Because the quartet of Lezovoy and then the midfield 3 of Szymanski, Morrow and Fomin is really, really good. The defensive for the very sound. I think in that Rostov game where they lost 4-1, they conceded obviously 4 goals that game. That's basically a quarter of all the goals they conceded this season, 16 in one game. I think they've got the 3rd best defence in the league. I think it's just obvious what they're missing. They've only scored 23 goals in 17 games. They just need a striker. So I'm really hopeful that they could just go out there and get that, because the improvement on the Schwarz has been really good. And I'm really looking forward to this game against Zenit at the weekend. I think Dinamo will go into that game, with a real chance. Obviously they're still underdogs. It's away at Zenit. But you never know, if they win that game at the weekend, they're right up there then with the top 3. I mean, I don't want to get too giddy and say that, Dinamo are title contenders, but they would be up there. And, I think they can, if not perhaps challenge for the title this year, then put the building blocks in place for a challenge next year when Schwarz had a bit more time. So optimistic signs at the moment. And yeah, they go into that game against Zenit in a good frame of mind, I think, especially with the form Lezovoy and the midfield 3 are on.
Yeah, and if we move further down the table, there's another side that have seemingly out of nowhere begun a reawakening at the bottom of the table, and that's Ufa. Ufa have now got 2 wins and 2, and they've only won one in their last 4 games. And the 2 wins as well are very impressive wins, of which, of course, Richard, you mentioned Rostov last week defeated Dinamo, a couple of weeks ago defeated Dinamo 4-1. And then Ufa a week later only they defeated Tambov 4-0 and then went on to beat Rostov themselves 1-0. So David, how are Ufa getting on? Is it the new manager, Rashid Rakimov, turning things around, or just getting players back on the pitch?
It's hard to say, really. Obviously, Rakimov coming in has made some difference. He's been there a little while now, so it's taken a while for them to get going. Yevseyev last year obviously was really good with them. They were hardly struck by COVID and then a lack of money in the summer, which led them selling their best players and not really replacing them. So that really hit them hard, and obviously that showed in the early stages of the season where the squad was clearly not performing, and obviously eventually led to Yevseyev leaving. The Tambov game was a strange one. Obviously, they won 4-0, which on paper they dominated this. But 3 of the goals are absolute worldies from outside the box. I seem to recall the combined XG for the 3 goals was something like 0.17. That's like total, which is ridiculous. All 3 of those shots had less than 10% chance of hitting the net. And all 3 of them went in. So and then obviously they scored a tap in towards the end once the game was dead. It was a strange one. They played well, but obviously they had some moments of magic to thank for getting them the win, arguably. And then the game last week or this weekend against Rostov was almost back to classically for Rostov. Weren't really they haven't really turned up at the races. Both who were just doing what they used to do best, where they just go somewhere, go away to a club and just frustrate them. And eventually they actually had a decent chance not long before the goal they scored. I forget who it was that had the decent chance. But then a long ball goes over the back. Someone was sleeping. I think it was Gigovic actually left. Gigovic or whoever was playing right back at the time left Andrich, the new striker they've got on loan, who's started scoring for them free. And, he manoeuvred some space for himself really well and had, an easy finish. So that got them the win. But Rostov were really struggling to get anything going. They had a strangely... actually, no, it wasn't this week. They had a pretty strong squad. It was the previous week where they were lacking a lot of players. They just couldn't really get much going forwards. And it was just the classic... If you're going to describe a classic group performance, it's go somewhere, not really do much, frustrate the opposition, and then score from one of your only chances. And that was what they did. We all know that I'm a big fan of Ufas. I like them. I always sort of back them to. I was never of the opinion that they're done for, which I know some people have written off completely, Hanu and Artyom. So I was always the opinion that they can still get out of this. That they can still do something. There's still a transfer window to come. They've got foreigner spots available. Hopefully they've got a bit of money knocking around. They can do something, try and improve the squad. It's a rosy time down there at the moment. A couple of wins on the bounce is all they need, and they jumped out of the auto relegation spots. So lovely.
I think now it's time to mention a team who doesn't maybe get mentioned enough on the RFN podcast. And last time we did talk about them was 2 weeks ago with Misha on, and I was in particular quite optimistic and full of praise of their manager Andrei Talalayev. And of course, I'm discussing Akhmat Grozny. Now, what's happened today isn't necessarily optimistic, nor is it good news, but it's very Akhmat in the sense that it's utterly crazy and a wild headline. Now, I'm just going to read this out without any context first. Is that the United States Treasury has imposed sanctions upon Akhmat Grozny FC under the Magnitsky Act, as the club is associated with Ramzan Kadyrov. The deputy of the State Duma, Igor Lebedev, has reacted to this. Now, I will preface Lebedev's comments in saying that for those who don't know, Lebedev is probably the biggest joke figure in the Duma right now. It's like when he speaks, nobody listens, a bit like Farage. I do not think that the sanctions against Kadyrov and Akhmat Football Club will affect his life or development. Everyone is so used to the new sanctions that they hardly pay any serious attention anyway. Which is a crazily incendiary quote. Why would he say that? But anyway, we'll give a bit of context. So the Magnitsky Act was an act that was signed by the United States Congress in 2012. And it was basically the first act that was bipartisan support of the Republicans and Democrats, which is very rare in America, and was signed into law by Barack Obama. And it was intended to punish Russian officials who were responsible for the death of the Russian lawyer Sergei Magnitsky in a Moscow prison in 2009. And it basically granted a permanent normal trade relations status to Russia. It's basically allows the US government to sanction those who it sees as human rights offenders, freeze their assets, and ban them from entering the US. Now, if you look at the list of people on there, I think it's generally going to be quite accepted by the wider world that a lot of these people are pretty dodgy and are kind of entirely on the list for a reason. Like, yes, I'm going to say it, Ramzan Kadyrov, he's on that list for a reason, and it's totally understandable why Ramzan Kadyrov is on that list. Why Akhmat are on that list is a little bit bizarre. Now, you just can't imagine that good old Vilka Angel is going to go to America on holiday, and they're like, sorry, Vilka, you're not allowed in, mate. You play for Akhmat Grozny. Like, is that really going to happen? Like, Andrei Semyonov, no, sorry, you can't enter Florida this year because you play for Akhmat Grozny. Now, it all seems a little bit bizarre and a little bit wild and kind of a little bit pointless, but it is just the latest in the wonderful world of the circus that is down in Grozny. And now we always call Spartak a circus, but at least Spartak circus is pure footballing and not every single matter of life like Kadyrov's is. Anyway, moving on to the last topic of today, which is the sacking of Shamil Gazizov. Now, for those, of course, who will know, we all know Shamil Gazizov has been sporting director at Spartak. He was signed in the summer after basically bringing Ufa from obscurity into Premier League regularity. And in roughly the end of November, rumours started to emerge that Gazizov may leave Spartak in winter, and we believe that the rumours came from Sergei Yegorov, and according to RB Sport, and that was around the back end of November. Interestingly, around the same time when we covered that, former Spartak sporting director Dmitry Popov had been signed to the board as sporting director alongside Gazizov as technically CEO. Now, on the 1st of December, it was reported by Sebastian Terletsky that on that day that Fedun met with Gazizov and a verbal agreement was then reached to terminate his contract. Now, that had then basically spread like wildfire among the Russian press. And to be fair, I think, well, my reaction anyway, and I think a lot of people's reactions was kind of incredulity. We were surprised why that was happening. It was always good to be, look, what's Fedun doing now? This is ridiculous. Look what this man can do if you give him time, money, and flexibility to do so. However, on the back of that, it started to emerge from now. All of these that I'm going to read are just rumors and hearsay that's emerged from various places, such as the mostly Spartak telegrams and people who are unnamed sources in these telegrams. Now, the first of this was that details of a cryptic summer transfer window had emerged that it was seemingly a transfer was derailed by Gazizov himself. The claim that Spartak were ready to pay up to 10 million euros for Toulouse midfielder Ibrahim Sangare before Shamil intervened, and then blocked the transfer with no explanation. Later on, they claim that as an alternative to Sangare, Spartak were in for Midtjylland midfielder Evander, but that pursuit too was then derailed by Gazizov. As a bluff, Gazizov basically made Ufa send in a blank bid to the Danish club, one that was equal to Spartak's own bid. Now, that's what these sources claim, and it's basically it seems to be the intention behind that was that Gazizov didn't want Evander, Fedun did want Evander, and Gazizov created this phony bidding war to make the price go up so high that Fedun would pull a plug on the deal, because essentially he wanted to protect Uranov in the team and his role in the team because he was his pet project that he brought in to Spartak. Now, Evander's agent has went on to claim that these rumours are true, and that both Spartak and Ufa had both approached Midtjylland for Evander, And he even went on to as far as to say that the same people were acting on behalf of both clubs, which he is quoted as saying is bewildering. Now, Ufa are incapable of spending 6 to 7 million euros on a player. That is not a conjecture. That is a simple fact. They cannot spend that sort of money. So there's definitely something in that. Now, on the 8th of December, further different Spartak Telegram channels continued to claim that Shamil Gazizov deliberately sabotaged manager Domenico Tedesco's operations and wanted a Russian replacement for Tedesco, and that he repeatedly tried to paint Tedesco as a weak coach and one that needs to be replaced. And this was, of course, just this week on the 8th of December that these rumours emerged. Once again, all rumours, all allegedly. And then more rumours emerged about more of Gazizov trying to exert control against Verdun, to paraphrase it and so on. But basically, Gazizov apparently tried to make it seem like Tedesco was blocking transfers, when in reality, Tedesco would only learn of them from the media. And it was essentially a power struggle between Gazizov, Verdun, behind Tedesco's back. And then this is why Popov was brought in to rein a leash on Gazizov. And now this report that was from Terletsky in Sport Express on the 1st of December claimed that Gazizov would leave after the Zenit game, which is the last game on December the 19th, 16th, give or take, before the break-up for the winter break. Now, it was announced on December the 9th that Gazizov had, December the 8th, sorry, in the afternoon, that Gazizov had left Spartak just a few hours after the second round of rumours had emerged. Now, these days of speculation all came to an end as Spartak officially announced this. And I will say first that Spartak's announcement with the Grandpa Simpson gif was highly disrespectful and really not good enough for a club of their stature in any form, no matter what went on behind the scenes. So, and then in following, Yevgeny Melezhikov, the club's security head, would take over as the new CEO, who would take charge of all off-the-pitch and corporate affairs, while Dmitry Popov, of course, former sporting director himself, would manage the sporting side, forming transfer strategies, the relationship between Spartak's senior and youth teams, and general long-term footballing philosophy. That makes quite sense. Now, with all of these rumours in the background, it does become clearer why Gazizov, if true, has been sacked. But regardless of that, I thought the tweet was highly disrespectful. So, David, first, what's your thoughts on this crazy and long-winded affair that I hope I explained clearly enough?
Well, I mean, it's a strange one. It's a bit disappointing, obviously, because we were all hoping to see, Gazizov work with Spartak long term, and his way of working, as we've seen at Ufa, is something that's going to be more effective over a longer period. At Ufa, he was renowned for his good business in the market, going out there, getting players, bring them in from unknown locations, players who are off the radar for a lot of clubs, developing them, showing they were good enough, and selling them for profit. And so to see it end so early is a shame. We all appreciated Gazizov's work. He was always one of those guys who came off as, he doesn't seem like a dick. He comes off really quite well in a lot of his interviews that he does. He's very knowledgeable, and he obviously works quite well. Now, obviously, he joined Spartak willingly and knowingly that Leonid Fedun was there, and that he probably is going to try and stick his oar in. And unfortunately, I think that's sort of been the beginning of the end for him. If it does sound as if he's gone there to Spartak. He's tried to make things work how he wants things to work. Verdun's come along. It would be like imagine you're a kid playing with Lego, right? And you're building something really cool, really impressive, and then your brother comes in and says, "Oh, let's do this," breaks it, and then walks off, not interested anymore. Verdun is the brother in this situation, and Gazizov's like, "Well, I've had enough." But actually, it's the brother's Lego set, and he tells you now you can't play with it anymore. So it sounds like basically he's just fed up of having to work with Verdun, who basically doesn't know what he's doing,
Yeah.
wanted to just sign players on a whim, presumably without checking with scouts or analysts or whatever the process is there, and basically not willing to give up the control that he would have expected in the role of technical director, and which you might expect a technical director to get, with a president likely just to sit there and let you do your job, not micromanage you or do your job for you. So it's a shame if that's the case, and it does seem likely that that's the case.
It's typical Fadoon. Yeah, it's just typical Fadoon. Fadoon's that you put the nail on the head with that analogy. He is the one who likes to have his shiny toy and likes to just stick his oar in and what his new shiny toy is doing now and again. More often than not, if he will panic and he'll think that it's going wrong, it's going badly, because he's being badly advised, really, really badly advised. People like Zarema Shalikova and Anatoly Bishevets, some other legends have recently unfortunately passed away, so I will not name them out of respect for their person. I've been behind the scenes badly advising Fadoon for far too long, and he has basically never learned for this. It's a shame because Gazizov comes in and it's the first time they give a real Spartak outsider a chance. They give him real autonomy and flexibility, or well, seemingly did so. And it looked like it was all going so well, and off the pitch and on the pitch. Now, his start of his transfer campaign wasn't ideal, but it's long term. This role is 90% long term. It's looking ahead and what as opposed to looking here and now, which Fadoon does so often. But having said that, if these rumors are true, and of course, need to say again, it is conjecture, and if these alleged things are true, because he's really created for himself an untenable position, he will never get that sort of autonomy at Spartak that he had at Ufa. He must have known that from the start. Even in the best of situations, it's just not how it works at a club of that size, and it never will work that way. Maybe he is best off as a big fish in a very small pond, like he was there. I mentioned Bishevets, who was, of course, former Zenit and national team coach and so on, player and everything. And he gave his opinion on Gazizov of late, and he said that he basically believes that the football creates conditions for the head coach to work, and that's what his job was, and that he didn't allow these conditions. He basically put himself head to head with Tedesco too often, more so than actually with Fadoon. Now, Bishevets is, like I said, very, very good friends with Fadoon and advises Fadoon quite a lot. So I don't know how much he will say about Fadoon, but it's interesting that Bishevets' opinion, it was the going head to head with Tedesco and not Fadoon that really sparked the end of Gazizov. Because if that is the case, this very much is a different in the norm from Fadoon, because every time that a manager gets too big for his boots, gets too popular, gets too good maybe, or says too much, they get rid of. Carrera, it happened to him, it happened to Alenichev, it happened to Karpin. Lots of managers over the years at Spartak since Fadoon's came in, when they go head to head with Fadoon or try and exert a little bit too much influence, they get binned. Now, this is the first time he's actually went on the manager's side twice, because Zorn was binned. I mean, Zorn was Tedesco's man. They weren't going against each other. But there's been two people sacked and relieved of their duties in high-level positions since Tedesco was announced, and neither of them are the manager, which is really, really unique situation for Spartak. Richard, what's your thoughts on the whole debacle?
Yeah, I'm about to say, James, I get where you're coming from, and I kind of agree. It's if this is true, of course, about Gazizov, if these rumours are true, and of course, obviously, all rumours you treat with a pinch of salt. But if this is true, then I think it's quite simply, yeah, it's a refreshing change from Fadoon. Actually, I mean, I still think you're always with Spartak waiting for the next episode with Fadoon, aren't you, regarding what he's going to do next? But this is actually quite a refreshing change. And out of the two horses between Gazizov and Tedesco, whilst Gazizov does have an impressive reputation for the work that he's done at Ufa, and that is clear for everybody, and I'm absolutely convinced he probably will end up going back there at some point soon. But I think the Fadoon has backed the right horse here in Tedesco, because, like I say, Tedesco is a young manager who, You know, at the age of 33, he got Schalke to second place in the Bundesliga, qualified for them for the Champions League. Since he's left them, 2 or 3 managers have gone in there at Schalke, and it's been a disaster. You know, they're bottom of the Bundesliga at the moment, and you know, he's a real promising young manager, but rebuilding his reputation. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think if it was a choice between backing 2 horses, I think Fortuna's backed the right horse here in Tedesco. And I think it was important that this was solved quick, because Spartak are doing really well at the minute. As I said on last week's pod, they have a chance of winning the title. It's definitely on this season, because all this, it's really close to the top, and the league has not been the best of standards this year, as evidenced by the clubs, the Russian clubs' results in Europe by and large. So I think it just needed sorting quickly, and hopefully now all this is put to bed, and Spartak can just get on with things now. But yeah, I think Gazizov, if these rumours are true, you're not going to be allowed the same autonomy at a big club than you are at a small club. It's a completely different operation. You've got different people to work with, probably more egos. It's completely different. So, but the most important thing is now that it's solved. And if it was a choice between backing Gazizov and Tedesco, if the relationship was unrepairable, then yeah, I think it's probably the right decision to back Tedesco.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, I want to echo thoughts that it is a shame that it's got to this point. But it's
absolutely.
If Fortuna didn't back Tedesco, he would have probably had a full-scale riot on his hands, because the Spartak fans, and more so the players, genuinely adore and worship the ground that Tedesco walks on. The players specifically so. Every time you watch a player interview or read a player interview, or watch even just the videos on Fratria and on Spartak's official YouTube channel and other Spartak fan websites, you really see just how in awe the players are of his character, and just how much they really genuinely do respect the man. He is fiery, but behind the scenes, by all accounts, he is like a second father to a lot of these who is very young lads and a very young side. And you can just see that every time Zelenkan Bakayev subbed on or off the pitch, Tedesco just gives him a hug, grabs him, and smacks him on the butt or smacks him on the back of the head. And Bakayev's just kind of like staring at him, not really knowing what to do, but you can just see that he is in awe of him. So he had to keep Tedesco no matter what. But anyway, that's the end of this week's RFN podcast. I would like to end as well this week by apologising for not having the promised previews with previewing the 2 German club matches between the 2 Russian club matches. Unfortunately, technical gremlins got the best of them, and they are up in the ether somewhere. But yeah, check out. We'll be back next week with the regular RFN podcast, and we're going to have the return of the analytics for the Champions League and Europa League games. We're going to have an opinion on the potential next CEO and director in at Zenit, and David's football manager piece will be coming out in between the two of this pod and the next pod. Richard, where can everybody find yourself online?
Find me at RichDPike89, at RichDPike89.
And David?
You can find me at RFN_David.
This has been the RFN Podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет с ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.